I am not one of the UN politicians, but I am coming from a very technical background, and I am leading at the headquarters in the urban lab several technical teams to develop like methodologies, approaches, and tools, and then go to the countries, implement them, and then come back and to improve our methodologies. So this is basically what we are doing in the urban lab, a team that we call ourselves urban lab in the headquarters. So I would like to give you like a couple of examples of how we support like different governments at different scales, different contexts. But first of all, to give you a bit like a context of the case studies, I would like to highlight a couple of points. The first one is we have been talking about the spatial planning at the regional urban scale, spatial planning, and the importance of it. Yes, it is very important, definitely, but it doesn't mean that, okay, we have the plan, we have the regional plan, spatial plan, now everything will work perfect. No, because quality matters. There are good plans and there are bad plans. And if you have a bad plan and if you implement the bad plan, then you will have the bad results, unfortunately. So I would like to remind that we don't have development goals, but we have sustainable development goals. Why I am emphasizing this? Because in most of the places, when we go to the governments, they have plans. They don't have like making the plan because they have the capacity, they have urban planners, so they produce plans. And they also say that, okay, they adopt the SDGs and they adopt the new urban agenda, they adopt the international guidelines on urban and territorial planning, but we still see in the plans like the ring roads going through the natural sensitive areas. Or in Indonesia, we were talking seawalls. Or in many other places, we see like the plans promoting like a private vehicle ownership, like apparently. And new urban agenda is not talking about that. New urban agenda is talking about the sustainable mobility solutions. So what I see, the problem is not having the policies. Everyone has the policies. Everyone agrees with the policies. But the problem is translating that policies into the plans. How to reflect that policies at the national level to the plans, national, regional plans, or the urban plans. And then the second problem is sometimes they have a very good plan, but they don't know how to implement it. It is very normal. It is like a very challenging thing. And because the problem is they don't know how to translate that planning decisions into the actions, implementable actions. That's a very complex thing. It is not easy. And I see as UN Habitat, here is the exact point that we can provide our support to the governments with our technical expertise, with our methodologies and tools, how to translate plan decisions, good plan decisions into the implementable actions. And of course, there is the problem of like a finance. It is not only about the capacity and knowing like how to create the action plans from the project from the special plans, but it is also the finance. So we develop also tools for the financing. And one important thing is that it will not be easy to implement everything, whatever we put in a plan. Because to implement a plan, maybe you have to build like 500 projects in a city, and there is no budget for that. There is budget for maybe like 10 projects. If it is like a rich place, maybe 50 projects, and that's it. So we need to prioritize. So we developed this like capital investment planning methodology. This is applied by various organizations in the world, but in UN Habitat, what we are trying to do is to link it to the special plans. That prioritization is coming from the special plan recommendations and the decisions. This is what we are trying to do. So this is the process that we follow in anywhere, in any scale, like the national, regional, neighborhood, city. So we first understand, we try to understand. This is the very weak point, usually, wherever we go. The understanding, they think that they understand everything, but without any like the evidences. They think that they know their problems, but without going too much like a detail. So the first thing is that producing the evidence. So they might have data. Usually they don't know how to interpret the data. That is like a very, I think, key point, that we try to compile the data, produce the data, but then triangulate that data so that it can be a good input into the planning process. And then we come to the planning. As I said, we want to implement the SDGs, New Urban Agenda, and the IGUTB principles into the plans. Not any plan, but a good plan. And then the transformation. And the transformation is the implementation. And we believe that implementation can be achieved at the local level. Whatever you write at the national level in the national urban policy, if you don't know how to bring it down to the local level, you cannot implement it. It will be written there, and it will be there in a book. And that's it. So you have to think about the local implementation at the neighborhood level. So urban design, you need to link. So as much as you come from the top to the bottom, you need to also think about from the bottom-up approaches. So I will present you 2 case studies, how we apply all this like a methodology, this process. One is Conakry. We applied the SDF, we call it, like the Strategic Development Framework. In UN Habitat, we apply it in various like countries. And this is the recent one that we developed in the Urban Lab. And we a little bit like adopted that methodology into the context in the Conakry. This is Conakry, the capital of Guinea in Africa. And it is like a very challenging, because everyone wants to live in Conakry. So there is like a very big population flow to Conakry from the cities around the region, from small cities, from rural areas to the urban areas, small cities to the medium-sized cities, but from the medium-sized cities to the Conakry, always coming to the Conakry. And then when we look at the settlement structure and what is there in every settlement and what is missing in every settlement, we have seen that one of the big issue and one of the reasons of this, like the population flow to Conakry, was the service facilities, because people cannot access good quality services in other cities, because investments are all made in Conakry. So it is like a very unbalanced, like the economic development and territorial development. And to change that unbalanced system and to balance it at the regional scale, and we have applied a methodology we call matrix of functions. It is like a quite simple, but it is also like a very complex. It is simple because you just look at all kind of urban facilities in the region, like a smaller, like the boundaries, like a small, like the provinces or districts, whatever it is called in the country. So you look at the education, you look at the health, you look at like a public spaces, etc. And then you create the matrix in which settlements, which one is missing, and in which settlements, which ones are like a strong. So that it gives you a clear picture where exactly you can invest to provide the services better, so the population can access the better services, so population wants to live there. And then it can also revitalize the economic activity in those places. And then based on that, you developed a scenario. You developed yesterday with the Japanese colleagues. We were talking about the visioning workshop that we have, like another project that they are supporting. So you developed the visions, and based on that vision, you list like a recommendations. What we do on top of this, we are testing the future scenario. This is like a very important point, because in the planning process, what we have seen usually, okay, they know how to create like the future scenarios, they create the scenarios, and then it stops here. No, but we are trying to test the scenario. So if the special recommendations applied, how will the future configuration of the settlements look like? So we are trying to imagine that and test it. So you come up with like a big list of projects. And now it is time for the prioritization, but not any kind of prioritization. How the prioritization indicators can be linked to the special recommendations. So we are doing it, and then after that, a very important step, okay, you know which projects are prioritized, but then how to find the funds to implement the project. So the budget fitting, this is what we call. So in every government, there are like the several different like the budget sources. So which projects can be fit into which like a budget source in the government. So this is what we are trying to have, and we are trying to develop these investment cards for the governments. And then another example is from Tajikistan. This is a very challenging location because this is the Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Region in the south of Tajikistan and neighboring with the Afghanistan and with China and the Kyrgyzstan on the north. It is challenging because one thing is politically, because it is very much left behind. There is like the ethnic like minorities live in this like the region, and there are like conflicts with the central government. So no investment is coming here for decades. So economically, it is like a challenging, but it is also very challenging environmentally because it is like a mountainous region. We'll be very familiar here. Because of those like a mountainous region, there are different types of hazard that we are not talking very often related to the like the climate change. Again, hazards are climate change induced, but it is not about like the heat islands or sea level rise. But in the mountain areas, they have their particular type of hazards, the avalanches, rock falls, like the debris flows. So that is why also it is like very challenging. And also socially, because like the community amazing, there is this sense of community because they are like the minority group that is like a part of like they were like good resilience, I would say. But other than that, like they cannot get like a good education, they cannot get like a good social services. So the society doesn't want to live here. New generations, they want to live somewhere else. So these like regional challenges I have already talked about, and of course like they are leading to like the food insecurity, and then the migration coming from Afghanistan in the recent years, and then yes, poor quality of infrastructure, and the regional connectivity. From Dushanbe you have to drive 15 hours, 16 hours between the mountains to reach the capital, Korok, in the region. So what kind of improvements can be done? When we analyze, we have seen that, okay, we are talking about the region, and then we are identifying the issues at the regional level, but the solutions, they cannot easily implement it at the regional level. But many of the regional problems can be solved at the local level. For example, the hazards, we said that it creates the regional inconnectivity because of the hazards. So what can be done? We need to develop some kind of like the building codes for the road infrastructure, for the roads coming to the main cities here. It is like a very, very basic like adaptation or mitigation kind of activities that they need to implement, for example, to protect the road from the avalanches or rock falls. They need to make like a terraces. They need to make like the gabions, these like a stone walls, and there are like several techniques to do it. So what I'm trying to say that we have to think all the scales together to find the right solutions. Sometimes, yes, we are talking about the regional scales, but sometimes the solution of the regional problem can be at the very, very local level. So we developed all these like strategies, like the growth management, like the conservation, basic service provision, hazard mitigation, etc. Again, the problem, they said that, okay, very nice, like we are very happy that you provided the strategies for us. Now, how do we implement it? That's the challenge. And it is very interesting. This is again from the analysis that we have done. I have already explained like different types of hazard. But very important thing is that when we do it, I think because in UN Habitat we are always trying to develop this human-centered like human-centered approaches. So it is not only about the areas affected, but the population affected. What kind of population is the most affected in which area? So we try to develop the solutions for that. And then at the local level, the solutions. So in a region or in a city, I think it is quite like applicable, the same kind of like the solutions, create new centralities, and with land use like changes, how much, for example, job opportunities you can create in a city. Just using the mixed use principles, for example, just using some creating public spaces and facilities in that centralities, how much you can change the city and make the people happy, but also create income for people. So this kind of the very practical solutions that we are trying to develop, and that solutions we are trying to include into the regulatory plans. What we are trying to do is there is the State Agency for Urban Planning. So they are the responsible body to produce the urban plans. We have a bunch of strategic recommendations. They don't know how to reflect them, how to draw them in a plan. So our support is, okay, mixed use, okay, let's sit together in which areas we can change the land uses and we can make it more mixed use so that people can have more job opportunities in those areas. That kind of the regulatory plan inputs that we are trying to create. And the implementation. So with that kind of the master plan in the regulatory plan, when we list all the projects in such a small city that Korok is a 30,000 people, population is only 30,000, but it's a big city for the mountain area. When we list the projects, it is 470. And then we didn't list every street and everything, we grouped them, still 470. So how such a small municipality can implement 470 projects? It's impossible. There is no budget, there is no capacity, there is no time, of course. So the prioritization, as I said. Yes, I am coming to that. Prioritization. And the prioritization and then the budget fitting. Okay, you list all the projects, you score them based on the special recommendations, and then which project can be funded from where. So we are telling the government that, okay, these projects, you cannot fund them, you don't have that capacity, financial capacity, go to the donors. These projects, maybe you can take a loan. For these projects, the development agencies, go to them. And for this kind of projects, maybe from your own budget, you can already implement. So this differentiation and the budget fitting is very helpful actually for the governments to understand how to implement the plans. So this is just what I have described. It shows a very good the visual explanation. You have the plan, but you identify the needs with evidence-based approaches, and then you develop the responses and the scenarios, recommendations, and then identify all the projects from the plan, and then you prioritize and tell them how to implement those ones. And as I said, that implementation, let's say that they have the budget, and it comes to the design level. They need to design them. And that design, everything actually, we have it in the New Urban Agenda, and we have it in the international and international guidelines for urban and territorial planning. We all know how to read, and we all understand what we read, but it is still challenging to bring them down to the design level. So what we are developing is we are breaking down all these the terminologies in those global frameworks, the compact, connected, inclusive, vibrant, resilient. And then what do they really mean to us? And what do we need to do to make our city compact, to make our city connected? So we develop lots of principles, very practical principles, and tips for the governments, for the professionals, that you can also come to me if you would like to talk more about this, but very practical, implementable tools that we are developing from here. Yes, as I said, that everything is in the global agendas. So our the specialty is bringing down those global agendas into the implementation level, and then thinking all the scales together, because sometimes solutions can be in another scale. Thank you very much.